Hello, my name's Mary Jane Mudd. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Houston, and I am so pleased that you're joining us tonight. Thank you for being here. This is the 101st annual meeting of the League of Women Voters of Houston, and it has been an incredible year. So go ahead and to the next slide. Okay, one thing happening here I've got to fix. Okay, so what I'd like to tell you first, just some housekeeping rules we've got here. First, we're going to say who our parliamentarian is, and that is Linda Cohn. Second, our timekeeper is Courtney Siegfried. We will be approving the minutes of this meeting will be approved by Renee Cross and Courtney Siegfried. We will be adopting the order of business on the next slide, so hold on for a moment. And we're going to adopt the rules. Really, I just want to tell you what some of those rules are. First, there will be 4 times that we're going to vote on an initiative tonight, and only members can vote. Everybody else can listen in, but only members can vote. If you have questions, please write them in the chat box, and we'll do our best to be able to answer them. Okay, so next slide. Okay, this is the order of business, otherwise known as an agenda. We're going to talk about what a great year it's been. We're going to have Voter Services VP Annie Benefield speak about some of the incredible work that was done by our Voter Services team this year. The Treasurer's report and the Budget Committee report will be shared with you. We'll be voting on adopting the budget. We'll also cover study and advocacy, the important initiatives that we've been following this year and what we're going to be doing next year. The dissolution of the 501c4, we'll explain that when we get to it. 2020-2021 board slate, awards and appreciation, and just a few final remarks from me. Next. What a year! It's been an incredible year. You know, everybody looks back on 2020 and goes, geez, you know, what we went through then, and we're just coming out of it now. Every nonprofit struggled with some challenges of doing the things that they needed to do with the pandemic. And yet, the great volunteers, the board, and so many voter services volunteers and more really came together and made things happen last year. The pandemic didn't stop us from our mission of empowering voters and defending democracy. You know, we did send out the annual report and it's on our website. So what we're covering right now in this hour is very high level. Don't assume that this is all we did, but I'm going to be sharing some highlights. Next slide. Okay. The fall started off, late summer fall, was the 100-year centennial of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. It was something to celebrate. And, you know, the League of Women Voters of the United States came together shortly after that ratification. So we did have a lot to celebrate. And one of our board members, Tico Hausman, did a whole lot to put together a great program working with some important partners. So one thing was working with the Heritage Society right in Houston. And we'll learn a little bit more about that in a moment. Go on to the next slide. We had a great speaker series working with the University of Houston and special events. You know, some of the special events included, goodness, every time I turned around, and we were so grateful for this, there were requests for members of our board to give presentations about the centennial, really about what women went through to get the vote. The struggle, the sacrifice. We got a lot of requests for giving presentations to organizations like Chenier, SABIC, Girl Scouts. That was one of the most fun things that I did. I know that Annie went to a number of universities. So there were a lot of those presentations as well. And go to the next slide, please. But back to the Heritage Society, we had, well, they created a beautiful exhibit. And you know, with the pandemic, it was kind of hard to get there. So there was the opportunity to observe that exhibit virtually. And we were just there a couple of days ago because that exhibit will be disassembled soon. But just talking about what women went through and learning about that was very important. And we made sure that we shared that information with as many as we could. Next slide. I mentioned that we partnered with the University of Houston, and TICO worked out a program and a lot of people participated. U of H was in leadership with it, but that was our book series as well as a movie series showing how women have really participated in the democratic process for the past 100 years. Now, if you go to your chat box, there are a couple of links in there. And I believe, yes, Liza Alonso on our board is dropping those in there for you. But those links will bring you to the book report, not book reports, our book series, our movie series. So you can go ahead and find those for yourself and read them. It's surely never too late. Next slide. TICO herself represented us at a march about voter suppression. And we were really grateful for that. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Next slide. Okay, I don't want to steal her thunder. Dr. Annie Johnson Benefield is going to be speaking momentarily. But I do want you to know that the voter services team really, really hit it out of the park last year against all odds. You know, if you can imagine the naturalization ceremonies that they were able to do in the past, they weren't able to do this time around. So what did they do? They came up with creative ways to register voters legally to ensure they were eligible, of course, but creatively. And on the day of, it was National Voter Registration Day, they led or participated in 40 different programs. And that's just the beginning. Next slide. Yeah, we'll come back to the voter's guide in just a moment. And again, Annie's going to talk a huge amount about voter services, and I'm sure that you'll be dazzled like all of us. But also, we became a go-to for media here in Houston. And it's not so much, it wasn't so much about, wow, I'm on TV. The cool thing was it was just a constant drumbeat of get out the vote. People really were just, it was obviously a contested election and a challenging election, but I've never seen such enthusiasm around getting out the vote. And so we were asked many, many times to either participate in media interviews or again, presentations for companies and organizations. Next. I wanted to put up a couple of these photographs. Claudia Ortega Hogue helped us with Telemundo and Univision and various media where they needed us to speak Spanish, but that was important to us. We wanted to reach different audiences. Next. Our voter's guide, the nonpartisan voter's guide that people know us for. We still managed to pull that off. You know, we had some budgetary constraints, but we still printed them in English. And then we made the voter's guide available in 4 languages online. So we still had English, Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese. And we also had Vote 411, where you could just type in your information, bam, get a ballot. We saw that 59,000 visitors engaged with our website to learn about where they needed to vote and how to vote. And 80,000 voters guide content page views occurred with visitors staying there for about 4 minutes. Next slide. We also have a great program called the Rising Stars, and this is a group of people that who get to apply, and then we interview and come to know and bring them into a cohort so they can learn about civic engagement throughout the year. They get to know each other and do great things in the city. This year was the largest cohort we've ever had with 30 people who did some incredible things. Next slide. Our leaders, our co-leaders of Rising Stars were Renee Cross and Lou Weaver. And the great thing about their group is that the group wanted to get out and do things in the community, even through the pandemic, and doing it safely. So for example, what you're seeing in front of you now, Rising Star Catherine Culbert recently participated in a tour of the Greens Bayou wetlands. And I'm looking at notes so that I don't miss anything. And it was hosted by the Harris County Flood Control District. Next. Every month, the Rising Stars come together and talk about what they're doing, give updates, and they learn from each other. So for example, their projects on voter education and registration targeting formerly incarcerated citizens, the housing insecure population, and underserved neighborhoods. These are all areas that the Rising Stars are focusing on, and they're creating a Government 101 document to help people understand about political action. Next slide. And we're almost done. One more thing about the Rising Stars, they managed to get together and have fun. And we would like to encourage anybody who wants to apply for Rising Stars, because a new program is going to be coming about. And the deadline for that is July 1st. And you can just go to our website and learn more. Just a couple more. Next slide. Election Day Phone Bank. We do this with just about every election, and certainly with the November 2020 elections. And we did it safely. We had 60 volunteers who stopped and gave their all. We had masks, we had, our tables were separated, and we're very grateful for our partners, KPRC, Telemundo, and NRG. Next slide. Another photo of some of our volunteers. All in all, on Election Day, we fielded 579 calls in English, 366 in Spanish, and that's a total of 945. And when I say it's a phone bank, it's not calling out, it's answering questions from people who need direction and, some information on where and how to vote. Next. The In the Loop Unit Group. This group has been meeting for years, longer than I've been around, and they really cover some interesting topics. Once a month they meet, and basically topics that are timely, topics that are of interest and of concern, and these are just a few of the topics that we covered last year. Different speakers, third-party speakers, just fabulous. It was all done on Zoom, and it was really good. Get out the vote, immigration, climate change, the Electoral College, how it works, and just to help people understand, like defunding the police, what does that really mean? So I continue to be a part of that group, and I would encourage others to do it as well. Next. Our membership team. Mika Rio and with Courtney Siegfried helping her a fair amount, and some others as well, we're able to launch a couple of new things this year, again, despite the pandemic. There was the launch of the League of Women Voter Houston Salons, a panel discussion with some very interesting, third-party speakers outside of the League of Women Voters, but experts. I guess I'll call them subject matter experts. And we've had two so far, excuse me. One was on voter rights, and the other was on redistricting. Both have been very, very well received, and we look forward to having more of those. I know Courtney and Mika are working on more of them. I do want to say that we did have a bit of an increase in membership this year to 420 members, but we can do more. Remember that if you're not a member already. Okay, next one. And with the new members, we've had some new member onboarding. We launched that as well, something we didn't do in the past, but it allows people to really get to know what the League of Women Voters is all about. Next slide. So we have a program called Conversations with the Candidates, in which Jean Prius, one of our committee chairs, hosts and talks to a bipartisan group or nonpartisan group of people who are running for office or people who wish to speak about certain issues. Jean always makes sure that both sides of issues are covered, and it's done on video, and it's pushed out through our social media. And this year, before the pandemic, in 2020, he was able to cover a lot of areas: the ratification of the 19th Amendment, what is Black Lives Matter, what are areas that concern you, and some of the elections prior to the pandemic. Next slide. I'm almost done. Here's the last thing I want to mention before we go into Annie Benefield. We empower voters and we defend democracy. The empowering voters comes from offering information, as I've described. Defending democracy is also essential, and we've had to do it. We've chosen to do it again and again the past year. During the elections of last year, there were times where we found that democracy was a bit at risk. One of those times was when we went from a number of drop boxes. We worked very closely with the Harris County clerk. He was great. And we found that some of the drop boxes were going to be pulled away, and we weren't going to be able to have as many as we needed. And that was going to impact the ability of people to be able to vote. Another time, and Annie will go into this, our great voter services team, they were putting out boxes with registration forms at post offices, but there was pushback on that. To a degree, perhaps it was inadvertent, but it was some suppression. And they worked and they got it done, and it worked out where they were able to put those boxes back. She'll explain what that means. Throughout all of this, we stayed strong. We supported democracy in every way we could. And I wrote an article, an op-ed that went into the Chronicle. So that's what that is there. And, it was just great that the local community could see what we were doing. So now we're going to go to the next section, and I have not covered everything, but I've covered enough. Next slide. Okay, before she speaks, I would like you to see a video. It's really a news clip of a news story of Annie Benefield and the voter services team. This clip says everything about the passion behind the volunteers and certainly behind Annie. Go ahead, let's play it.
Well, not being able to vote is not ancient history. One Houston woman tells us her father, the son of a former slave, was not allowed to vote until he was in his 50s. Our Anastasia Bolton tried to keep up with Annie Benefield as she worked to make sure others get to vote too.
Am I walking that fast? Okay. We needed an arrow that said that way. I don't have a method to this madness in terms of we've never done a drive-through voter registration effort before.
Annie Johnson Benefield
Hi, Jennifer, come on.
doesn't really seem like someone who needs a method.
This is where the tent's going to be set up, right here.
She has the voter registration down, even in a pandemic.
Here's the sanitizer. We got to put that sign over.
She also doesn't need a history lesson to know registering and voting are hard-earned rights.
The past is not so long ago for me. Being the second generation in my family born out of slavery, my father was the first generation born out of slavery, and he lived to be 90 years old, and he voted in every single election until his passing. Here is the clipboard.
For Annie, the right to vote, the reasons she's here now,
When early voting starts,
are intertwined with her family's past.
that my dad was drafted in World War II, where he had no say, he had no ability to advocate for himself, to cast a ballot, to select a political leader, to determine his faith. And we were fighting for freedom and democracy around the world. He didn't get a chance to cast a ballot until the 1968 presidential election in direct response to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. If they need to change their address,
Annie
and you can change your address online.
is a League of Women Voters volunteer.
And this tells you all the ID you need
She spends a lot of her time making sure everyone gets a voice,
to find out what's on their ballot.
the voice her parents were first able to raise in their 50s.
Seen tremendous change happen in our society as a result of people getting the right to vote. In terms of participating in the political process, you're willfully giving your consent to the people you're represented to make decisions about government and politics. And so that is tremendous in itself.
Thank you for bringing it. It's very helpful.
Annie Johnson Benefield is not a leave it to chance type.
I'm heading over here to see if we can solicit some of these people to come so they can register to vote.
Like others before her who fought for everyone's right to vote,
I would love it if we could get 1,000, but 100 might be a realistic number.
she's fighting for people to stop long enough to register.
Fill it out and you can register to vote.
Having lived and seen what's possible when they participate.
October 5th is the deadline.
I'm Anastasia Bolton.
Well, not
Just amazing. And now I would like to hand it over to Dr. Annie Johnson Benefield.
Mary Jane has already said that we've had triumphs and struggles during the last year. In spite of COVID, in spite of the pandemic, we have actually still empowered voters and defended democracy in a very profound way, along with the volunteers and voter services. So next slide. We've distributed 15,400 applications with notes from the League of Women Voters congratulating, because once COVID happened, no longer we were having naturalization ceremonies with 2,500 people in an arena anymore. We had to improvise. And so once the USCIS decided that they would resume ceremonies, we literally were very persuasive in they allowed us to come in and actually bring applications to them, and they put it in the packet. So we definitely wanted to demonstrate and show you that little note in the background is the note that we include, letting them know about the League of Women Voters, congratulating them and telling them that if they need fact-based, accurate information, they can go to the League of Women Voters website to find out information about elections and about civic engagement and political participation. And that is one of my colleagues and her husband. They were actually naturalized on July 2nd, 2 days before the 4th of July. We had just delivered 2,000 voter registration cards with that note on it to USCIS. So that was a particular triumph. We were just excited, very excited about that happening. Next slide. So as Mary Jane previously stated, that we came up with creative ways in terms of doing voter registration. No, we had never done this before in a pandemic, so we had to come up and improvise. So Nancy Kroll, the genius behind the QR codes in Spanish and English, she came up with it, that people could just put their phone up, take a picture. We would send them a voter registration card. It would take them to online. They could fill out their information. We would put in the mail, put their name and address, and we would put in the mail a voter registration card to them. And as part of that effort, Nancy funded the postal stamps, for actually making sure that they were mailed out to them in terms of a very collaborative effort. And these are some of the events in terms of us doing voter registration out in the community using contactless, as minimizing the amount of contact that people would have in terms of doing the voter registration. So these are just some of the events that we were involved in the process of the voter registration. Next. We did National Voter Registration Day 2020. We had over 40 plus sites. We actually partnered with the Harris County Public Library. Alamo Brew House actually donated some money to the National League, and they in turn shared it with us in terms of this voter registration campaign. We partnered with KPRC. It's consistently a partner, not just with the phone bank, but with the National Voter Registration Day. They partnered with Goodwill Industries, and we had locations, and they reported continuously and repeatedly. And so if you're even remotely curious, you can go online and pull up KPRC and look at some of the footage that they actually covered during this big, exciting day. We had literally hundreds of volunteers staffing locations around Harris County doing this election cycle on National Voter Registration Day. It was amazing because we didn't allow, it was a tropical storm was in the Gulf. We didn't allow that to deter. We just simply postponed the day when we were supposed to do it, and we did it 3 days later. So nothing was going to stop this voter registration team, no matter what. Obstacles, but we triumphed in spite of that. Next slide. This is Judy Vibich and Lauren Blanton, the Adopt a Post Office Initiative. Mary Jane mentioned it briefly about that we came up against obstacles when we were trying to empower voters and defend democracy. We had always heard that you could actually get a voter registration card at the post office. So these two members of the League of Women Voters came up with the idea, and you can see how handiwork the boxes and whatever, they literally almost, along with John and Nancy, put these boxes together, and a core of volunteers out there in the community, people were volunteering, actually excited about the prospect of doing something because everybody had been so homebound by COVID. They were excited to go to the post office, and the post office was one of the places that was constantly open, and we actually targeted the voter registration boxes in a way that if it was a specific underserved, underrepresented community in terms of Spanish language or Vietnamese, Chinese, we actually targeted the voter registration card to those communities in that language so we can make sure they were getting the information they need in terms of filling it out. And besides, if they filled it out while they were at the post office, they could drop it in the mail because they are actually post-paid, the voter registration cards. So this was a tireless effort. You could see they have a wonderful setup in the yard just going for it. They were hardworking, very conscientious about this project. And this was an effort. At one point, we distributed the boxes. Then we got some feedback from the post office saying we had boxes summarily disappeared. And we had to get members of Congress, Representative Al Green and Sylvia Garcia, Representative Sylvia Garcia, they became involved, and we got a letter from the post office, and our volunteers took that letter to the post office, and they were able to actually place the place the voter registration boxes back in the post office. which was kind of exciting. And we got a lot of free press as a result of it. News stations did. We got editorials in the Houston Chronicle. People were really excited. The mayor's office reached out to us and worked with us in terms of helping us to get some of the locations for our National Voter Registration Day in response to that, because people wanted to help. They could not believe anyone would want to create obstacles to keep people from participating in the political process. Just that's so near and dear. Next slide. So here's some additional, this showing the two lawmakers, two congresspersons who became involved. They actually visited the North Houston Postal Facility ahead of the election, and they were very well aware of what was happening because things nationally was happening with regard to that. But this was one of a very creative initiative, adjusting and adapting to changes in our environment. We did not allow a pandemic to stop the effort of the voter registration team. Next. That's the letter. This is the letter that each of our volunteers took to the post office to make sure that they were able to put the boxes back in. And even now, this wasn't simply an initiative for just that election. Consistently, there are volunteers who are constantly monitoring and taking voter registration cards to the post office. Many of them are keeping them behind the counter. So if people ask, or have them on the counter, so if people want to actually get one and register to vote. So some of the boxes are no longer being displayed, because I thought it was great branding for the league, because we had our logo on there and all of that, so people would know about the League of Women Voters and that we were responsible. Just a little trivia tidbit stories. I walked into a place, I went into this restaurant, and I had my pin on. And the guy said, "You're with that league thing, right?" And I said, "Yes." He actually gave me a free dessert in response to that. He said, "I really appreciate what you all are doing." He said, "I'm already registered." So, and they had our box displayed in Barnaby's Cafe on the counter. They had I was just so excited, because not only did we adopt the post office, it was in the post office, but actually businesses around the community actually had some of our boxes as well. And since it worked so well, we can see doing this again in 2021 and 2022 for the upcoming elections for next year. This was a very successful initiative, and we'll move forward with it. Next slide. So these were some of the partnerships and presentations that we did. Mary Jane already mentioned some of them. We partnered with the Harris County Elections, the Girl Scout. Nancy Crawl did a presentation for some young students in Brazil, telling them about the American election process through Zoom. Technology caused the League of Women Voters to even have a far more expansive reach than it normally would have had because of Zoom. The pandemic facilitated opportunities sometimes that we may not have had in the regular normal part of the course. So this was kind of, St. Arnold Breweries was an extraordinary partner. They let us set up every weekend in terms of doing voter registration. U of H in terms of the partnership for the Centennial Book Club, Lone Star College in terms of registration. This was just such a tremendous effort by so many people being engaged and being involved. And Metro is a continuing, ongoing partner with the league. They offer free rides, and we publish it in the voter guide, offer free rides to the poll, doing early voting. Actually, last year, they were so magnanimous, they offered it almost during the whole time during the early voting period, as well as on election day. So we were very emboldened by that particular initiative in terms of working with community partners, making democracy work for every eligible person in terms of participating in the political process. That is some of the most exciting thing. As a teacher, being involved in this effort is just so tremendous and warm my heart in ways that I can't ever fully explain this to you. And with the legacy in terms of my parents, this is near and very dear to me. Next. There's Nancy. She was just a media star during that time period. She was talking to everybody, doing everything. And this is the listing of some of the places that we actually did. The Canadian Broadcast Company actually came down to Lone Star College, and Lone Star agreed to let them come in my classroom and to talk about voter registration and to film the students doing this process. It's pretty exciting. ABC 13 did One Voice, One Vote and had the league on there. And my husband said he actually counted the airtime, and I was asked more questions and I got more airtime, he said, than any of the other speakers. I'm not sure why that mattered, but he said I was talking about voter registration and election. I guess it mattered to him. So Nancy became a superstar on Fox 26 in terms of giving interviews. And of course, Mary Jane talked about all the numerous, I'm not sure during a regular election cycle, maybe this would have happened. Normally, maybe it does happen in this way, but it seemed like the pandemic facilitated an opportunity for the League of Women Voters and Voter Service to expand the bandwidth and get the League's name out there, and it will resonate on the mind and the tongue of many people throughout our community. And I think that is absolutely incredible, and that we're going to continue that legacy into the next year. Next slide. These are some of the literature that we put out during the 2020 election. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the Voter's Guide in a very profound way. Mary Jane mentioned it already, but Jackie and Virginia did an absolutely incredible, amazing job, as always, putting so many hours of labor and tedious work goes into the creation of the voter guide, and having individuals to translate it and proofing it. There is just so much. This is the voter's guide is the League of Women Voters signature marquee, as I would say. And this is a way to be disseminated into the community that even people who don't know who we are get to know who we are. And that although we had challenges because of COVID, because many of the outlets in which we normally did distribution were no longer available in terms of doing it. But the Houston Public Library was like, we want them, we want them. Every patron who wants to actually get books, pick up books, want a copy of the voter guide. There was no way that we could actually facilitate every particular person who came to a library to get one. But we did have, as Mary Jane said, the PDF up online in Vote 411 in Chinese, Vietnamese, Spanish, and English, that you could access it, pull up your guide to know exactly who it is that you're supposed to vote for, and Vote 411. And she told you about the number of people who visit the site to see all this information. I mean, this is the voter's guide is ultimately the signature of the League that resonates from year to year, election to election, that's out there, that's permanently in terms of our branding and telling the community that we are committed to empowering voters and defending democracy, not just doing voter registration, but educating the voters, a fact-based, nonpartisan way, so they can come to their own conclusions and make their own decisions about voting. Next. So 700 volunteers in our database. They are anxious to get started right now in terms of getting up and get going. And Nancy is already organizing, working behind the scene in terms of organizing. We are still supplying voter registration cards to the naturalization, USCIS. Actually, they're ramping it up. They are actually set to start swearing in 2,000 plus people per month. According to the branch sheet norm. And so as a result of that, Lauren and Judy are steadily working in terms of getting the cards, getting the staple, a sticker on there to let people know who we are as the League, where they can go to get information. These people are really dedicated to the effort. Having hardworking, conscientious people, volunteers, working to get the job done so we can make sure that we empower these voters and defend democracy and keep defending democracy, and making sure people get out to vote is critical and important. We're not, the song, we should have probably had a little mantra in there for the song, ain't no stopping us now, we on the move. I think that's it for me. Next slide. I think Mary Jane is coming back. Oh, Katie.
We'll just introduce Katie, but thank you, Annie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Campbell Shumway, and we'll just go ahead and get right into the report. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so obviously you can hear based on all of the slides before this that COVID really didn't stop us from doing our hardest work that we have done, and that really came true on the financial side as well. Every single team made a huge effort to make sure that their expenses were very low, or that they had donations dedicated to those efforts, and it really showed through. If you got a chance to look at our annual report, you could see that we were able to have a very robust 4-language voters guide for the November 2020 election. And then we also did a very successful winter fundraising push. And this was headed by our VP of development and our development team and our board and also our members. And it was very successful. And it really helped us kind of establish a foundation for how we would move forward in the coming year. So we can go on to the next slide. But before we go to the budget, I want to celebrate some of our gifts that we have here. As I mentioned, we had a really successful year, and so we're just so appreciative of all of our donors and funders throughout the year. You can go ahead and move on to the next slide as well. Something that we also want to recognize is that, we've mentioned this before with all of our volunteers and everything, that everyone put in so many hours, and then that really translates into being able to do the work that we do and not having a huge expense on the other side, having paid staff and things like that. So thank you to all donations, big and small. They really make a huge difference for us. You can go ahead and go on to the next slide. So all that to be said, right now, this is kind of where our total assets and where we're standing as it is. We have a restricted endowment of $24,568, and that is broken out. We will, in our finance committee, we will develop kind of a plan for that and make sure that it's it's an account that really works for us, and that we have kind of proper standards for how to use those funds later. But right now we've just put them in restricted, which is great. We're not touching it. And then we'll have a plan for how to move forward with those funds and how to grow them, so that way we have something to come back to if something else kind of like crazy in the world happens. We also have in our 501c3, we have $68,878,000, and this was as of April 30th. So that has fluctuated a little bit. But I've looked at this and then also our projected cash flow for the next few months, following into like the next 6 months. And we feel pretty confident that we're in a good spot. We continue to have a really nice pull from memberships, and then just kind of ongoing donations, which are always helpful throughout the year. Our teams are working really hard to make sure that we have continuous funding that kind of helps fulfill and help provide funds for all of the important things that the organization is doing. And then we'll talk about this later, but you guys know that we have been working towards dissolving our C4 and working towards having a single 501c3. So we'll go into details a little bit later, but those are the assets for that account as well. And you can always look at more on our annual report. You can move on to the next slide. So we met as a budget committee, and on behalf of our budget chair, Tanya, I'm going to present our fiscal year 2021 or 21-22 budget. You can move on to the next screen. This is our budget committee. Thank you to everyone. If you're interested in being involved, I'm happy to talk spreadsheets with anybody. It's very fun for me, so please come and join us. On the next slide, we'll go through just a little bit more detail. I'm happy to answer any questions about this. We'll kind of go through a summary, but what I mainly wanted to point out is that these numbers are based on some of our fundraising numbers that we did hit in 2020. So we're very confident that these are really solid numbers. For example, the voters guide income for contributions, we raised $21,000 for the voters guide last year. So we're confident that we can hit those numbers again. And then on the expense side, what I also wanted to point out is that we are going to fundraise specifically for a brand new website. And so those expense and income items will only come online if the income is there. Then we'll execute the expense as well. We feel like it's an incredibly important resource for everyone. You can tell that digital age is here, and we're ready to use the website in the most robust, important way as possible. In the next slide, you'll see that we have one more set of spreadsheets. You can move on to the next one. Okay, and on this one, we have on our fundraising for our events, we've kind of taken a more conservative approach just so that way we have a little flexibility, just understanding whether we're going to be doing in-person, large galas, large luncheons, and things like that. So those numbers could certainly grow, but we're confident that we can at least attain these kind of more conservative fundraising numbers for the events. On our general fundraising, which is a huge focus for our development team, this is really to ensure that that everything that the organization is doing will be financially supported, and that will really help bolster up the organization as well. And we've had kind of detailed conversations about how we're going to get there. And then if you go on to the next slide, it's just kind of a summary of what I've already described to you guys. We will continue working with our donors, with our members. We've had some successful events recently and want to really engage people and get them involved and understand that every dollar that comes to the organization really, really gets to work. You can tell from everything that we've been doing, everyone is working so hard and every dollar is spent very, very importantly towards our mission. On the expense side, all of the other, housekeeping expenses will remain flat. And we are voting today for a full voter's guide, which includes the 4 languages, and then also printing for those as well. We have smaller printing for some of the foreign languages, but then we also will have some print available for people and really pushing those digital efforts. Along with that, we also have a chunk of marketing dollars that will go towards really trying to push these guides to their constituent bases so that way they're properly into the community so they can be received well. So we're really taking a full picture effort to make sure that everything for the voters guide is out to our community as best as possible. And then, as I mentioned, we will assess the website when those funds are raised, and that will be in the spring of 2022. So with that, on behalf of the Finance Committee, this budget has been recommended by the Board of Directors, and I'm seeking a vote to date.
So what we're going to do, and Katie, thank you. You have a huge job, so thank you. What we're going to go ahead and do is approve this with a majority vote. In other words, unless there are any objections, we will consider this the budget for the upcoming year. And I'm looking at the chat box, and if there aren't any objections, we'll go ahead and approve this budget. And again, thank you, Katie. Next. Okay, now it's Zach Miller, our VP of Study and Advocacy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for joining us this evening. If I can have the first slide, I'll go ahead and get started. A pandemic, an impeachment, a renewed struggle for racial justice, a tropical storm, an election, an attempted coup, a second impeachment, a vaccine, a catastrophic winter storm, and a legislative program of ruthless voter suppression. Each a scarring hallmark of the last year, each a challenge that the League of Women Voters rose to meet. On behalf of the Study and Advocacy Committee, I'm proud to share with you some of the highlights from a year unlike any other. Could I have the next slide, please? We supported efforts to conduct a safe, secure, accurate election during the greatest public health crisis in over 100 years, and we sued in court to halt attempts to throw our local election process into chaos. And we spoke the truth when a pernicious narrative began to spread that claimed otherwise. We reached out to every member of our local state legislative delegation to share our thoughts and concerns with them for the 87th legislature, and will continue to remain in contact with them as we prepare for the possibility of special sessions. A note on this slide, as of a few hours ago, the conference committee had not yet released its report on this dreadful piece of legislation. So we will also be keeping an eye on that. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. We worked diligently to support census efforts that drove our county's participation to surpass the state average, and our work continues as the census figures flow into redistricting. We support fair, transparent maps and oppose any efforts at racial gerrymandering. And here you can see some of our leadership speaking with the mayor at a press conference on the issue of voter suppression related to Senate Bill 7. If I could have the next slide, please. We continue to support the movement for ranked choice voting. As we turn our eyes towards the next year, we propose a simple focus for the Study and Advocacy Committee. Support discussion and action on issues of social justice, strenuously push back against anti-democratic narratives and elections disinformation, and oppose racial gerrymandering in the redistricting process. That concludes the report for the Study and Advocacy Committee. It was a tremendous year, full of challenges. I'm proud to say that we rose to meet each of them, and I'm looking forward to the coming 12 months. Thank you.
Zach, thank you so much for your leadership. That was a great report. And so we are going to now vote on the 2021-2022 focus as our study and advocacy priorities. So again, we're going to adopt this by a majority vote unless there are any, I'm going to take a look at the chat box, unless there are any objections. Nope.
I should offer one clarifying remark. It is also printed in the workbook. We have decided that there will be no local studies. There are no specific local studies to be undertaken in the coming 12 months. Otherwise, these three items will form the core of our focus for the next year.
Thank you. Okay, that was helpful. Thank you, Zach. So, okay, this will be approved unless there are any objections. So approved. Thank you. Thanks again, Zach. Next slide. The next slide is mine. Okay, so Katie spoke a little bit about the 501c4, and go ahead to the next slide. It has been the counsel to us by a legal team that we should go ahead and dissolve the 501c4 and just be a 501c3, which is something that we've wanted to do for a while. You see, 501c3s have a better opportunity of working, of receiving donations. We don't want to turn any donors away. It appears to be more common in Texas. A number of the other chapters have dissolved the 501c4, so they could just be 501c3. In a way, it's a bit of a corporate umbrella or a merger, if you will, under one umbrella. Next slide. Yeah, and as I said, according to Texas law, the League of Women Voters does propose that we do this, and we have put out the information. There's a whole document on it and why we chose to do it and how we're going to do it. And so I think we'll just keep it short for time right now and go ahead and vote. All right. So we will adopt this unless there are any objections. Will be a 501c3, period. Any objections? Nope. So approved. Next slide. Now to Liza Alonso. Can we hear Liza?
No, you can't. No,
Okay.
say my spiel again. You go ahead and go to the next slide while I run through. Good evening. My name is Liza Alonso, and I serve as an at-large director for the League. And I am so pleased to be here with you this evening to give the report of the nominating committee. I stepped in for Rocio Rubio as interim chair, so I want to acknowledge the great work she did before I came on board. So thank you, Rocio, for that, and also to the rest of the committee that you see there on the slide. Thank you so much for your hard work. Next slide, please. All right, so this was also in your board book, so hopefully you've had a chance to read over this, but the nominations committee is pleased to present the slate of candidates for election as officers and directors for the League of Women Voters of Houston for the 2021-2022 year. Just a note that this slate was prepared in response to matters made crucial during this past pandemic year. We had a lot of disruptions, and with that being said, needed to expand our bandwidth substantially. Any relevant bylaws or amendments that need to be set out by the board will take place and definitely be presented to the membership for ratification over the next year. So you can look over those, and keeping with the bylaws, the candidates that are designated in red or boldface type will be presented to you all this evening for election. Any overlapping terms that you see there are based on anticipated resignations in those relevant positions. So before I bring this to a vote, and I believe there's another slide with additional names, so let's click it. Thank you. So just look those over really quickly. But before we take a vote, I do need to open it up for floor nominations. So if there's any nominations, you can put those into the chat right now. I do not see any. As per the evening's theme, we are also doing majority vote for this slate of candidates. So if there are no objections, this 2021-2022 slate passes. No objections. Okay, this slate passes. Thank you. Congratulations to all of our board members, both new and continuing. Looking forward to working with you. And for those of you watching and are in anticipation of joining our team, we have many chair and volunteer positions that will be available. So please let us know if you're interested in coming on board. Thank you.
And now we will we'll introduce Jeff Reichman, who has done a fair amount of work on awards and recognition. He's one of our board members who provides a lot of assistance to us. And here he is to speak with you now.
Hey, everybody. This has been a fantastic annual meeting. I've done so many of these now, and it's always fun to be the person who can speak about all the wonderful things that y'all have done this year. And so I'm very excited to present some awards. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the assistance of Linda Cohn in this, in developing all of this and helping me stay on board with all of the league's wonderful activities. And I also wanted to acknowledge the Black Sheep Agency for having so many wonderful stories on the website that I can stay on top of and really learn. So can we go to the next slide, please? We have 2 Outstanding Achievement Awards and a couple of maybe disqualified for winning too many awards in the past, but special shout outs here. The first Outstanding Achievement Award is for Lauren Blanton. The COVID-19 pandemic presented new and dire challenges to voter registration. There was so much we didn't know about the virus and how it spreads or what happens when we get sick. And when the pandemic set in and naturalization ceremonies were put on hold, Lauren and Judy Vibage worked with U.S. Customs and Immigration Services to implement innovative and safe ways to register voters. They developed comprehensive voter registration kits and distributed them at 90 post offices across the region. And when they encountered political resistance from the U.S. Postal Service, the League of Women Voters leadership at all levels, alongside elected officials, appealed to the USPS and prevailed. Voter registration kits were here to stay. This is the type of battle that the League has fought for over 100 years, and it's a reminder that democracy requires action. And so we are awarding an Outstanding Achievement Award to Lauren Blanton with special Outstanding Achievement honorable mention to Judy as well. The other Outstanding Achievement Award goes to Carol Shattuck. When Carol retired as the Executive Director of Collaborative for Children, she wanted to spend time giving back to the community, and she found out about the League of Women Voters Houston through our website. She saw an open position on the board and she reached out, and boy, are we glad that she did. In the short time that Carol has been on our board, she has really helped us focus on sustainable fundraising by engaging our current members, and not just for fundraising appeals, but to let them know all the wonderful things that League of Women Voters Houston does. And really, that really encourages our community. We're pleased to award Carol with an Outstanding Achievement Award for making such swift progress, ensuring the financial future of the organization. If we go to the next slide, please. The Sam Keeper Award. So the Sam Keeper Award for Voter Services is presented to an individual who provides outstanding service to the League of Women Voters, helping us achieve our mission of voter education and voter registration. This is a relatively new award. It was established in 2015 to honor longtime League member Sam Keeper. Those who knew Sam often talked about his dedication to the mission of voter service and good citizenship. This year's Sam Keeper Award goes to Norm DeMoose of the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. Norm is the section chief at the Houston field office. In this role, he manages the office's naturalization program. And every year, the League helps register thousands of new voters at these ceremonies. And for years, Norm has worked with the League to make sure every attendee has an opportunity to register to vote. Indeed, registering to vote has become part of the ritual and celebration of the day. So this year, we're excited to present the Sam Keeper Award to Norm DeMoose. We could go to the next slide, please. Last but certainly not least is the Helen Hunter Award. The Helen Hunter Award was established more than 20 years ago in honor of Helen Hunter, a much-loved League member and president from 1982 to 1985. Some of you might not be familiar with this award. That's because there isn't an awardee each year. In fact, the Helen Hunter Award only makes an appearance when the recipient is so deserving that we need a special honor to confer. This year's Helen Hunter Award goes to Renee Cross. Renee has been deeply involved with League activities for many years, and specifically, Renee co-leads the Rising Stars program with Lou Weaver. When I talked to Renee about the League, she said that the League mission and vision is very much in line with her own personal thinking and what she's dedicated her career to. Indeed, Renee is well known in the public policy community as a driving force behind the Hobby School for Public Policy at the University of Houston. And because of Renee, the League is able to reach new generations of people who are passionate about voting rights. And I'm so especially proud that she's our bridge and ambassador to younger generations, because I can't think of anyone better to receive this award. So this year, the Helen Hunter Award goes to Renee Cross. And I think that's it. That wraps up our awards. I did want to give us a moment of silence for League members who passed away this year. I'm not going to read off all of their names, but I encourage you to take a moment and to look at their faces and look at their names and remember. Okay, Mary Jane, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, next slide. So I wanted to end our meeting and our presentation with this photo on the left. You know, a few years ago, I woke up one day, I'd been writing some, I was complaining on social media about this, that, or the other to do with politics. And I woke up and I thought, why don't I do something? Instead of talking about it, instead of writing about it, instead of disagreeing with people on Facebook, get up and do something. But I had no idea what the League of Women Voters was going to do for my life, really, as well as, what we could do for others. Like Jeff said, democracy does require action. It isn't a spectator sport. And this group of people, not just the board, but the volunteers, hundreds of people just so passionate about voting, about having a voice. And that photograph kind of represents it for me. I took that a couple of years ago. I was new to the League, and I got a chance to register voters after becoming a VDVR. And I would suggest that to anybody who wants to get involved with the process. And I think I ran out on the floor and I said, "Hey, everybody, wave." And I can't even tell you the excitement, the enthusiasm, the joy that was in that room for that naturalization ceremony, again, pre-COVID. And I guess that's really what it boils down to, a desire to be a US citizen, a desire to speak as a US citizen, and the right to speak as a US citizen. It has been my privilege to serve as president the past couple of years. I'm grateful I'm not going too far because I'll be here as past president, immediate past. But I want to let you know, we're a bunch of volunteers. Everybody who works with the League does it on their own time. And that just goes to show you the commitment and the dedication. Feel free to join us. I believe Courtney put a link up, but you could also just go to our website, find out how you can volunteer. There's a whole lot to do because, again, democracy is not a spectator sport. Thank you and have a good evening.